सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Veiled by the great emptiness, the Baloch smuggler convoys eluded the gaze of 3 empires, silently cutting across the mountains of Zargonghar and Safed Ko onto the coast of Makran. Liquor, opium, automobile parts, sewing machines and silk flowed across British India's northwest frontier into Persia, Afghanistan and beyond. Local merchants even refused to purchase legally imported sugar. In a single week in the summer of 1932, 100,000 silver pieces were sent from Zahedan to settle accounts, British administrators recorded. Even though the smugglers could face execution, imperial law was no match for native cunning. The nephew of the Baloch chieftain Idu Khan, for example, worked for the British Customs Frontier Guards, historian Mikia Koyagi writes, while his son-in-law was employed by the Persian king's Zahedan Road Guards Department. A century on, the modern inheritors of those networks are sending a tidal wave of Afghan-made drugs washing over the Indian Ocean. Last week, a French warship operating in a multinational mission in the Gulf of Oman reported seizures of drugs with an estimated street value of $108 million. Earlier in the month, Indian naval operations led to the seizure of a record 2,500 kilograms of methamphetamine as well as heroin. Tons of narcotics stamped with Afghan cartel trademarks. Pegasus, the winged horse, the rampant eagle, the scorpion, have been showing up in European ports like Felixstowe and Antwerp and Rotterdam, ingeniously packed into legitimate container shipments. Like their colonial-era ancestors, smugglers are the economic backbone of impoverished communities in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Last year, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Organized Crime warned that despite a fitful Taliban ban, Afghan opium sowing had reached record levels. Ensconced in the political system and cocooned by Pakistan's intelligence services, the cartels responsible for bringing that harvest to ports in Balochistan and then to the wider world are operating with impunity. Figuring mostly in the footnotes of history, its pirate navy once attracted the wrath of Portuguese imperial forces in 1582. The tiny Baloch fishing town of Pasni has turned its obscurity into a valuable asset. Elite clans like the Bizenjos and the Kalmati long dominated the town, which has a population of just 35,000. These elites once served as key elements of the slave trade operated by the Sultan of Oman. Later, they owned the fishing boats that trawled the rich estuary of the Shadi River. Led by the gang lord Seth Ganj Baksh and his brothers Seth Murad Jan and Imam Baksh Fauji, the fishing fleet of Pasni and Lasbela today form the backbone of Afghan drug exports. Heroin and methamphetamine arrive from Afghanistan, are stored in Pasni and then transferred by fishing boats onto much larger ships or delivered at small ports across the Indian Ocean rim. 10 men arrested by the Gujarat police last year from the Al Sohaili, a fishing boat carrying 40 kilograms of heroin, were all fishing fleet workers from hamlets around Pasni, police records show. Zubair Drakshande, arrested in last week's naval operations, is alleged to have received some 5 lakh per trip, a tiny fraction of the 2,500 crore street value of the methamphetamine he carried. For many impoverished people, running heroin is just part of a larger fabric of trafficking that forms the backbone of the local economy, Kia Baloch and Niaz Lashkari have reported. 11 million litres of fuel, for example, are estimated to be smuggled out of Iran into Pakistan each year. Following the killing of several fuel smugglers, just laborers really, in 2021, large-scale rioting broke out in Iranian Sistan Balochistan province, with angry residents attempting to storm government buildings and police stations. Each part of the shipment of narcotics from Afghanistan involves low-grade but reliable economic activity. The cartels, which provide farmers with advances to grow opium and ephedra, work alongside the Taliban, their dollar revenues holding up its jihadist proto-state. The cartels also have to arrange for the procurement of chemicals like acetic anhydride, ammonium chloride and sulfur from Pakistan. There are drug cooks, drug mules, drug loaders and unloaders. Turbat's overseas colony, which houses dozens of mansions covered in beautiful glazed tiles, is home to many of the top traffickers, journalist Umar Farooq revealed. Their guests, police discovered in the course of raids some years ago, included hostages from Tanzania, Nigeria, Yemen and Iran, people kept as human collateral until their cartels paid for the delivery of drugs sent from the town. Terrorist groups are often responsible for providing the cartels with security, in return of course for a fee. Even though low-grade opium trafficking had been part of the borderlands for centuries, the industrial production of heroin only began after 1979, when Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate began encouraging jihadist groups to raise cash by running drugs. General Muhammad Ziaul Haq's military regime, expert David Winston recalls, I quote, fostered an ecosystem of government protection of heroin dealers, government officials profiting off the heroin trade, and significant political influence of heroin syndicates in the government. Following the rise of the first Taliban emirate, the cartels became institutionalized. The Mujahideen commander Mullah Naseem Akhundzada, expert Gretchen Peters reports, even threatened farmers who refused to plant poppies with castration. The trafficking lines to Europe at that time ran north through Iran into eastern Turkey from Central Asia onto Russia. Fugitive gang lord Dawood Ibrahim Kaskar's cartel pioneered the use of the Indian Ocean routes to reach European markets, often transiting through East Asia, which has a large, well-established diaspora from Gujarat and Maharashtra. Exposés in the media revealing the existence of ISI-backed heroin laboratories across Pakistan's northwest led to public demands for action against these heroin groups. After all, the drug was claiming the lives of young people in the West. Little was done though. Then Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto sometimes threw Washington a bone or two, extraditing notorious traffickers like Muhammad Anwar Khattak and Mirza Iqbal Beg. Few of the big cartel bosses though were ever touched. Former military ruler General Parvez Musharraf's ally Mir Imam Bizenjo, better known as Imam Bhil, would later be named as the head of one of the world's 5 top cartels. Waris Khan Afridi, appointed Minister for Tribal Affairs by Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, was later arrested for trafficking heroin. Haji Ayub Afridi, another notable narcotics boss, became a key figure in Nawaz Sharif's Islami Jamhuri-e-Ittihad. In spite of Imam Bhil's international narcotics designation, he continues to be an influential businessman, investing in military-linked real estate projects at Kalmat Khor, near Pasni, journalist Maqbool Ahmad has revealed. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif would later allege, in print, that he had been approached by Army Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Mirza Aslam Beg and then ISI Director General Asad Durrani to authorize large-scale drug deals to fund, I quote, a series of covert military operations in desperate need of money. The culture of impunity, though, is still deeply embedded in Pakistan. Karachi businessman Jabir Motiwala Siddiq, alleged to have invested cartel funds in property and in the Karachi stock market, actually secured the support of the Pakistan government for his efforts to avoid extradition to the United States. Efforts to destroy the drug industry through the use of military force have, generally speaking, been pretty ineffective. Economist David Mansfield calculated in 2019 that Western air raids targeting Afghan drug processing plants. Plants is maybe a big word for facilities that just use a few metal pots and a heat source. Rarely inflicted any significant losses. The anti-narcotics air missions, though, often cost millions of dollars. The main methamphetamine trading hub at Abdul Wadud Bazar in Afghanistan actually expanded after bombing raids, satellite imaging showed 2 years ago. The implosion of the state in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, the work of scholar Shahryar Fazli shows, could make counter-narcotics efforts even more complicated. Formal policing in Balochistan is already extremely limited, he points out, with the state subcontracting operations to tribal groups. Many of those tribal groups, of course, complicit in the narcotics trade. Like imperial authorities discovered a century ago, it's pretty hard to fight markets, even markets for goods as malevolent as drugs. In countries like Portugal, authorities have registered success by decriminalizing even the use of hard drugs for personal use and focusing on demand reduction. The demand reduction effort economists Sonia Felix and others have shown leads to a reduction in trafficking since the profit margin goes. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency's Afghanistan operations, Charles Cogan, later told journalist Loretta Napoliani that the United States sacrificed its war on drugs to win the Cold War. The hundreds of thousands of young lives still being destroyed by methamphetamine and heroin show how tainted that victory is and what price we might yet pay for the events unfolding in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm National Security Editor of ThePrint. Thank you for watching Security Code.